welcome. You're watching We the People. I'm Rishika Barua. Farmers are back on the road. The last week has seen yet another bitter standoff between security forces and the farmers. Tear gassed, subjected to rubber bullets, and shut out of Delhi's fortified borders. Today on We the People, we'll actually decode what is it that the farmers are demanding and whether this demand for MSP is viable, what is MSP, and what it means for you and me, the consumer. So what is MSP? It is essentially minimum support price. It's a minimum price at which the government procures crops from farmers. It was enacted to ensure that a fair return is given for the farmer's investment. Currently, there are 24 crops, including rice, wheat, chana, moong, that fall under the MSP umbrella. What are farmers demanding? Farmers very simply are saying that we want MSP on all crops and further a legal guarantee for the same. So while there are 23 crops that are currently under MSP, there is no statutory backing for these either, which essentially means that the government can choose to not buy crops at MSP because it isn't a legally binding thing. Further, the farmers are now demanding that the MSP calculation should be revised according to what the late Bharat Ratna MS Swaminathan headed commission had actually recommended. So the government has fixed MSP at 1.5 times the cost that is incurred by the farmer plus family labor that goes into cultivating the crop. Farmers want 50% markup on the cost based on the inclusion of land value as well. This is what the Swaminathan Commission had recommended back in a report that was filed in 2006. We won't get into too much technicality, but what we will do is put out a graph for you in just a bit, which will explain to you what the rough estimate of cost is going to be between what the government has currently put MSP at and what the change farmers want according to the Swaminathan Commission report. That aside, the government remains hopeful that talks will lead to a solution. Interestingly, the government has also maintained in its stance that they need to balance the right of the farmers and the right of the consumers. So is this really some kind of a balancing act? Is it really like a farmers versus consumers kind of a debate? This is what has prompted us to ask on We the People this evening. If it is really a consumers versus farmers balancing act, what will the farmers' demand for MSP mean for you and me? Will it lead to a rise in food prices, fall in food prices? What does it mean for inflation? We look to answer and simplify this entire debate for the benefit of the consumer on the other side. We have a panel of experts. We'll ask them two simple questions. Is a legal guarantee for MSP viable? And what does this farmer MSP demand essentially mean for us? Well, joining us on the broadcast, Devendra Sharma. He's a leading food and agriculture policy expert. Harish Damodran, he's a senior journalist who's written about this entire MSP calculation in great detail. Professor Apurv Javadekar, he is assistant professor of finance with the ISB and also a former research director at the RBI. We also have Guni Prakash, member of the MSP committee, and we're hopeful that Yogendra Yadav will be joining us. He's a former president of Swaraj India. He'll be joining us in just a moment. But, just in order to put this entire story in perspective, I want to first begin by asking you, Mr. Guni Prakash, you are a member of this MSP committee that was set up in order to look into these demands. It's a different story that after the first farmer agitation, nothing really came off this committee. In fact, the farmers didn't even accept the constitution of this committee. आप इस कमिटी पे रह चुके हैं, गुनी प्रकाश जी, आप बताइए हमें कि जो फार्मर्स की एमएसपी की डिमांड है, क्या वो डिमांड वायबल है, क्या वो डिमांड पॉसिबल है सरकार के लिए?
नहीं, हमारी मीटिंग जब किसान आंदोलन के बाद जो कमेटी हुई थी, उससे पहले किसानों ने कभी भी उस आंदोलन के 3 कृषि कानून में उन्होंने कभी भी एमएसपी की बात नहीं की। लेकिन आखिर में जब वो तय हुआ तो माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने एमएसपी को सुनिश्चित और पारदर्शी करने के लिए उन्होंने कमेटी बनाई थी, जिसमें 3 जो सदस्य है वो संयुक्त किसान मोर्चा के भी शामिल किए थे। लेकिन उन्होंने उस समय उसका बायकॉट कर दिया, उन्होंने बात नहीं की। उसके बाद हमारी कमेटी ने कार्य किया और उन्होंने सोचा कि भाई किसान को कैसे एमएसपी सुनिश्चित किया जाए, किसान को कैसे मार्केट किया जाए, भाव दिया जाए। उसके ऊपर हमने ने काम किया और हमारी कमेटी की जो रिपोर्ट है वो लगभग तैयार है, जो हम प्रधानमंत्री जी को देने वाले हैं। लेकिन उसके
आपसे एक
बाद
बहुत सिंपल सवाल है गुनी प्रकाश जी, हम इस पूरे स्टोरी में फॉर और अगेंस्ट में नहीं घुसना चाहते हैं, हम वी द पीपल पे सिर्फ एक मुद्दा उठा रहे हैं कि क्या ये डिमांड पॉसिबल है और लोगों पर, आम आदमी पर इस डिमांड का क्या इम्पैक्ट होगा।
बिल्कुल, जो इसकी गारंटी की बात है एमएसपी की, वो बिल्कुल संभव नहीं। हमने पूरी कमेटी में बात की, वो हमने संभव नहीं माना कि एमएसपी की गारंटी की बजाय हमने कहा कि एमएसपी के साथ साथ बाजार भी होना चाहिए। जो आज बाजार बंद किया हुआ है सरकारी नीतियों के खिलाफ, लेकिन जो आप उसको कह रहे हो कि हाँ जी
ठीक है, आपने ये सुनिश्चित कर दिया है गुनी प्रकाश जी कि जो कमिटी है उसका ये मानना है कि एमएसपी फीजिबल नहीं है सरकार के लिए, बट वी हैव अदर वॉइसेस ऑन द शो एज वेल who will hopefully
मैडम एक मिनट मैंने ये कहा कि उस समय हमने इस पर चर्चा की, अभी हमारी कमेटी की रिपोर्ट अभी नहीं आई, वो हमने बताना है कि कमेटी में क्या क्या हमारे मुद्दे हैं, उस पे हमने सबने अभी फैसला करके रिपोर्ट देनी है, रिपोर्ट के बाद ये तय होगा। लेकिन ये बात आई थी कि ये संभव नहीं है, जो एमएसपी की गारंटी की बात है
वो हमें समझ में आ चुका है, क्योंकि स्वामीनाथन कमीशन रिपोर्ट 2006 में जारी की गई थी. This report was made public in 2006 and since then there has been no MSP for all and neither has there been a legal guarantee for MSP. So where the government stands and where the committee stands essentially is, I mean, it's no secret that they believe that the MSP is not viable. But there is another side to the story as well, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Devendra Sharma, as a food and agriculture expert, my question to you is very simple. The government buying crops at a certain cost from the farmers with MSP or without MSP is bound to make a difference at the cost at which the crops are being sold, which means it is bound to impact the consumers. How does the MSP demand impact consumers? Very simply, if you can explain that to us.
Well, first of all, let's be clear, there is no other way than to legalize MSP in this country. If you really want to pull farmers out of the distress that they are living in, there is no other way. Why I am saying this is that if the MSP gets legalized, we must understand that 50% population in India is engaged in farming. Okay, which means about 700 million people, if I include the families, are dependent on farming.
Right.
Now, just see, out of this 700 million, this is the family size, but the farmers, if I take it, only 14% farmers, according to the information that was presented in Parliament recently, are getting MSP. And the rest of the farmers, which means 86% farmers, are dependent on the markets.
Right.
If the markets were so good, there is no reason why farmers should be protesting. You will agree with that. If the markets were so good, there is no reason why the European farmers would be protesting.
So that is the side of the farmers which we understand. But like I said, my question is slightly different. I appreciate your thought and I appreciate where you're coming from. But the question is slightly different. That is this demand going to impact consumers? Because if government is buying at a lower price, it's going to impact potentially the price at which it's being sold as well, right? So what does it mean for you and me? That's my question. If you could explain that to our viewers.
I think before we get on to this, we need to be a little clear about what it means for the country. And don't forget, the producer is also the consumer in India. Unlike America or other countries where the population of farmers is very low,
yes,
roughly 1% or 2%, in India, the producer is also a consumer.
Right.
The tragedy is that when we talk of consumer, we don't even talk of farmer.
Okay.
That's the tragedy. In fact, all these years, consumer has gained at the cost of the farmer. And consumer has never discussed how should we help out or bail out the farmer.
Okay.
That's the tragic situation.
Right.
And this is because we have been made to believe that agriculture has to be sacrificed for the sake of the industry. All macroeconomic policies are aiming at keeping food prices low. I don't understand, if you are a consumer also, how does aloo pyaj impact the country's economy? Imagine, आलू प्याज का भाव बढ़ता है, the prices go up. The Reserve Bank of India tells us, oh, the inflation has gone up, so we must do something to keep inflation back onto the same kind of a trajectory that they have fixed up, or the kind of a kind of a line that they have drawn, 4% plus and minus 2%.
Well,
Why?
I don't know. I don't know if I would or viewers would entirely agree with you on the aloo piyaz analogy, because it does impact household budget in a huge way. We're
Yes,
not talking about
that. That's why I'm
macroeconomic
saying,
implications here, but micro. I appreciate your point. I appreciate your point, but I want to take this question to Yogendra Yadav. Yogendra Yadav, the reason we're debating this and the reason we're talking about this on We the People is because if you look very closely at what the government is saying, they are saying that the rights of the farmers need to be protected, but also the rights of the public and the consumers, almost pitting it as a farmer versus consumer narrative. Now, Devendra Sharma has very nicely put it that the farmer is also the consumer, and one respects that side of the debate. But is this really a farmer versus consumer debate? Break it down and explain it to consumers who are watching.
May I begin by saying that in a discussion on MSP, this cannot be the first question. Yes, it's a legitimate question. Yes, we should be concerned, worried about its implications for food inflation. Yes, it's a valid question. But allow me to first rattle off a few things before I answer the specifics of the consumer. Because it's a legitimate question, but cannot be, because in this question, in this country, 50% or more are producers. So the MSP as a policy is mainly targeted at protecting the producer in the country. The questions are, A, is it morally justified? Devenji has clearly said it. That basically farmers are only saying, you have been declaring something called minimum support price for last 60 years. Please honor your own commitment. B, is it okay in terms of economic rationality? Yes. Markets are distorted if there is intervention by the state, but markets interventions take place all over the world. Don't we have minimum wages? Don't we have MRP? In this country, don't we even get into airlines prices and such like? And of course, as Devenji has reminded, we intervene the moment consumer prices go up a bit. So the government intervenes in the market. If you do so, then you might as well intervene in favor of the producer as well.
Okay, fair point.
Three, the question is it fiscally possible? Because that's a question that has been raised again and again and again.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's so much of baseless fear mongering which is going on in the country.
Why do you say that?
10 lakh crore rupees, 16 lakh crore rupees. Now, the simple answer is you would spend 10 lakh crore rupees if you purchase all the 23 crops of this country and burn it or throw it in the Indian Ocean. That's when you would spend that amount. It's an elementary school arithmetic that your actual loss or gain is the difference between your purchase price and your sale price. When the government purchases these things, they also sell it.
Yes.
So it's only the difference. And CRISIL, not me, don't believe me, but CRISIL is a serious economic organization. They have come up with a figure 3 days ago to say if the government had respected the present MSP level, it would have, if the government had made up the gap between actual market price and the current MSP, the cost would have been 21,000 crore rupees. Yes, last year was a relatively better year. Normally, it would be a little more expensive than that. I had done calculation for 2017-18 with my colleague Kiran Bisa.
Yes.
Our conclusion was that it would have cost 47,000 crore rupees. So let's say 50,000 crore rupees. Can't this country afford that? In a country where you are willing to give 1.5 lakh crore rupees of product-linked incentive to industries, where you are willing to lower their corporate tax rate in the hope that something would happen.
Yes.
So isn't that possible? Yeah.
I like I said, I respect that thought, and I give you a moment to address the larger MSP question. But we've had several debates on the larger MSP question, but I think the consumer question is equally important. So I'll ask you this again.
Let me come to that.
If the government is buying at a certain price, they're also selling at a certain price, does it impact the market?
It will have some impact on the market. There is no doubt.
Yes.
But the projections being made are utterly unrealistic. Please remember, number one, for example, the farmer gets what? MSP for wheat is about 22 rupees a kg. 22 rupees 50 paisa a kg is the market rate. All right, is the MSP. Let us say without MSP, the market rate would have been 18 rupees or so. All right. How much do you and I pay for atta when it comes to the market? We pay at least 40 if it is low brand. And there's a minor cost of, turning wheat into atta. Or if it's a better brand, premium things, we pay 60 rupees,
Okay,
50,
fair.
60 rupees. So the point I'm making is the increase for farmer is a tiny proportion of the actual thing. If you really are serious about consumers, for heaven's sake, do something about the middlemen. And number two,
That's a fair point.
So that's one. And number two, if you actually, it is unfair to put it is entirely legitimate for the government to protect poor consumers.
Okay.
But you tell me, why should you and I get subsidized wheat, which is what we are getting right now?
Fair point.
Why should
You
we be
made
subsidized?
several important points, and I have two other panelists who I want to pose these questions to. To you, Professor Apurv Javadekar, first, do you agree with what Yogendra Yadav and Devendra Sharma have just said? In principle, do you think that, of course, it does, the MSP guarantee does come at a cost. However, the costs and benefit analysis needs to be done in a fair manner.
Thank you, first of all, for having me on the show. So I'll just, in terms of like the fiscal calculation numbers quoted, some numbers around like 10 lakh crores have been quoted, which are not correct.
Yes, which I think all panelists have agreed. Yes.
Yes, but there is a point that gets ignored, is that government needs to buy and sell, and right now we are sitting, even when government does not buy everything and buy just like say 30-40% of the rice production, 20% of wheat production, we are still sitting on huge amount of buffers in FCI, Food Corporation of India, and even after distributing enormous amount of grains and cereals under various government schemes, management of FCI stock is impossible beyond a point.
Okay.
And that means that when government buys so much under MSP legally, the offloading period is going to be, we are not talking about couple of months, but couple of years perhaps. And so that means upfront investments of 10 lakh crores or 6 to 8 lakh crores at least. That's the working capital requirement. And that means there is going to be sustained borrowing. Right now we are borrowing 11 lakh crores.
But there have been arguments, right, on how the government doesn't have to buy all under MSP. You can give a certain amount of MSP on all crops, but not all purchase has to be bought on MSP.
Yeah, can I come in for 1 minute on that?
Yes, please.
I think my friend makes a very fair point that if you were to purchase all the crops at MSP, the operational implications are very large.
Yes.
You have to put in a certain investment. And yes, there's a lot of wastage in FCI. There's a lot of inefficiency in the entire system. And therefore, we have been saying, farmers' movements have been saying, we do not want the state to purchase all crops.
Yes.
And I think that is the basic confusion in everything, because we confuse MSP with procurement.
Yes.
There are three ways of ensuring MSP. Procurement is only one of them. Second is market intervention to uplift the prices. Third is import-export policy. And fourth is deficit payment.
Right.
Which can be done. You don't have to purchase.
Professor Javadekar, if I can take this back to you very quickly. Impact on consumers. I think Yogendra Yadav has established that, of course, it will impact the consumers, but at some level, we need to balance that impact and maybe look at the larger debate on middlemen as well when we're looking at MSP. Do you agree with that, Professor Javadekar?
Yeah, those are fair points. I think the middleman costs in Indian agriculture
but
markets
how much
of
an impact will it have on consumers?
It is very difficult to put a number as to how much food inflation will go up.
Yes.
But one has to understand that it will, definitely it will. And even if the wheat prices go up by 4 rupees for a poor household, that's quite a bit per kg, right? That's one. Second, even if 50% of our country is producer of the agriculture, MSP will necessarily benefit richer farmers more. That's the point that gets ignored, because it is based upon per kg calculation. And so schemes like direct benefit transfers might help, might be able to help poor farmers better. So that is my economist's perspective here.
Right.
That
no, that's an interesting perspective. But Harish Damodran, I read the piece that you wrote in the Indian Express, and you've essentially argued what we heard both Devendra Sharma and Yogendra Yadav talk about, which is the feasibility and the fact that this is not going to be an entirely, it's not going to be a fiscal disaster entirely as many are projecting it to be. But how do you look at this entire number game in terms of the consumers? Like Professor Javadekar says, even a 2 to 4 rupee increase in the prices of, say, essential commodities like wheat or rice will have an impact on the middle class and on poor households. How do you look at the numbers? You've had a deep dive into the numbers.
Okay. Do you mind if the farmer is assured of a, say, price of, say, 12 rupees per kg for onion, or say 15 rupees per kg for potatoes? I don't think it's going to harm you and me, because we are anyway paying 30 rupees, whatever, 25 rupees kind of thing.
Okay.
So I think the assurance of a minimum support price, it has to come, in some way or the other. Let's get two things right. Okay. Number one, India has many mouths to feed. India is not Chile or New Zealand. Okay. Those are huge producers, but not necessarily big consumers. Whereas we have many mouths to feed.
Yes.
Okay, and those mouths cannot be fed through imports. Okay, our farmers will have to produce it. Okay, and farmers will produce only if it is worth it. Yes. So it is, as a consumer, I have a vested interest in ensuring that the farmer farms, that the farmer is in the business of farming.
Yes.
The farmer will be in the business of farming only if there is some certainty, right? I mean, the farmer faces two uncertainties. Number one, production, right? I mean, at the time of sowing, there may be no rains. Okay. After he sows, the crop, there could be pest and disease attack.
Yes.
Okay. At the time of harvesting, there could be unseasonal rains. There could be hailstorm. Right. So he's already facing uncertainty on account of production, and which is worsening because of whatever climate change and all these things.
Fair point.
On top of it, he's facing price uncertainty.
Yes.
I can tell you that
You're saying
the kind of price uncertainty and production uncertainty, no corporate in India.
It's a question of survival and sustainability for the Annadata as well at some level, and that's something that's closely linked with food security. Something we can't undermine as well.
Let's forget the interest of the Annadata. Let us look at our own interest.
No, our interest is in their interest in a certain sense. So your argument is very nuanced. I have to say that.
Yes.
We have a young audience with us as well. Journalism students, a lot of them. You have a question. Go ahead.
What will happen to Indian economy if government agrees with the MSP demand?
Okay, I think a lot of the panelists have, in a certain sense, tried to address that. But Harish Damodran, do you very quickly want to take that on? If you have a short answer to give, because I'm out of time.
According to me, it won't cost much to implement an MSP. I mean, the formula which I would propose, if the government were to ask me, I would do two things, First thing I will say is, yes, I will pay you the price difference. I'm not going to buy all your linseed and sesamum and jeera, etc.
There is a counter voice as well, and I have 30 seconds left. Guni Prakash ji, सवाल ये उठा है कि इंडियन इकोनॉमी का क्या होगा अगर एमएसपी लागू हो जाती है? ये सवाल उठा है. मेरे पास 30 सेकंड है, आप क्या बोलेंगे?
नहीं, मेरा ये कहना है, भारत रत्न चौधरी चरण सिंह ने किताब लिखी थी इकोनॉमी इंडियन, उसके ऊपर उन्होंने कहा था कि अगर एमएसपी लगातार जारी रही तो किसान ही नहीं देश भी बर्बाद हो जाएगा. सबसे पहले बात है चौधरी हमारे देवेंद्र शर्मा जी ने एक बात कही थी. एक मिनट बोलने दो, आप मेरी बात कहने दो. उधर देवेंद्र शर्मा जी ने कहा कि 1970 में जो गेहूं का रेट था 80 पैसे और पेट्रोल का रेट था 55 पैसे. जो मतभेद हुआ और कर्मचारी की इतनी तनख्वाह थी इतनी थी, तो आज देश को रेट है. और स्वामीनाथन आयोग जी ने यह भी कहा था कि बाजार खुला होना चाहिए.
Yogendra Yadav completely disagrees with you. Yogendra Yadav, I'm out of time. You have 10 seconds. I just want to say Guni Prakash ji is a member of the MSP committee. It's important to hear what he has to say as well. But Yogendra Yadav, 10 seconds. I'm completely out of time.
Chaudhary Charan Singh never said anything of this kind. Actually, there was a reverse policy at that time, which was called levy, where farmers were forced to give their produce at a level lower than market price in the national interest.
Okay.
Chaudhary Saab had talked about that one, which was the reverse subsidy.
Okay.
I'm really sorry to see that members of MSP committee do not know elementary things about this country. Very sad.
All right. Well, you've heard all sides of the story on how the MSP debate, how the MSP demand is likely to hit consumers. We've tried to put this debate in some kind of context and perspective. I sincerely hope that's been useful for you, the viewer, to make up your mind. Thank you very much to our panelists for joining us on this riveting discussion. That's all the time we have on We the People tonight. Thanks for watching.